Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we begin tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them for getting the best value of my extra cards and my extra bulk. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards, including your bulk. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of standard service and then charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Our Mox Masters tournament is back. On Saturday, December 3rd, we will be hosting another webcam CEDH tournament. It is 100% proxy friendly and played in the comfort of your own home. Top 16 gets $60, top 4 gets $200, and the winner gets $500. Spots fill up very quickly, so sign up now and reserve your spot. Link is in the description below. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Bailey piloting the partner pair of Krark the Thumbless and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. This is a deck looking to abuse the free value of its commanders to storm off and win. Bailey's opening hand contains a Swan Song, Spellseeker, Lotus Petal, Volcanic Island, and his London Mulligans are Twin Flame and Mystical Tutor. Next, we have Ben piloting Breya, Ethereum Shaper. This deck seeks to combo off as fast as possible with either Ad Nauseam, Underworld Breach, or Bomberman lines. Ben's opening hand contains a Mishra's Bauble, Urza's Bauble, Mana Confluence, Godless Shrine, Underground Sea, Scrubland, and a Wheel of Fortune. After that, we have Mark piloting Ezuri, Renegade Leader. This is an Elf Ball deck seeking to cast a bunch of elves and win the game with big mana payoffs. Mark's opening hand contains a Forest, Elvish Mystic, Deserted Temple, Selvala Heart of the Wilds, Arbor Elf, Summoner's Pact, and a Collected Company. Finally, we have Drake piloting Esika, God of the Tree. This deck seeks to storm off using Jeskai Ascendancy while falling back on classic Thoracle and Breach lines. Drake's opening hand contains a Land Grant, Past in Flames, Wishclaw Talisman, Mystical Tutor, Deathrite Shaman, Silence, and an Ignoble Hierarch. Without further ado, let's kick off this lewd lifelike lauded lip sync. Bailey had the best facial tattoo at the table and gets to start us off. Bailey draws a card for turn and plays a Volcanic Island. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. Bailey passes. Ben draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts a Mishra's Bauble. He casts an Urza's Bauble. He cracks his Mishra's Bauble looking at the top card of Bailey's library. He cracks his Urza's Bauble looking at a random card in Drake's hand. Ben passes the turn. During Mark's upkeep, Ben draws 2 cards through his baubles. Mark draws and plays a Forest. He casts a Llanowar Elves and passes the turn. Drake draws and starts off his turn by casting Land Grant for its alternate cost, revealing his hand, showing that he has no lands. In response, Bailey casts Swan Song. This could not have been more brutal for Drake, as Swan Song counters Land Grant, and Drake creates a 2/2 bird. Now dead in the water, Drake passes the turn. Bailey draws and plays an island. He casts his commander, Krark the Thumbless. Bailey ends his turn. Ben draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He casts Dragon's Rage Channeler. He ships the turn to Mark. Mark draws and plays a Deserted Temple. He casts Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Mark passes. Drake draws, misses his land drop, and passes, discarding Past in Flames to hand size. Bailey draws and casts a Mana Ball. He casts his other commander, Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. It enters as a copy of Krark. Bailey gives the turn to Ben. Ben draws and plays an Underground Sea. He taps his Mana Confluence to cast Wheel of Fortune. Everyone discards their hands and draws 7. Ben moves to combat, and since Channeler now has Delirium, he attacks Drake. Drake takes 3, and Ben passes to Mark. Mark draws and casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Wood Elves. It enters, and Mark fetches up a Forest onto the battlefield. He casts Realm Walker, naming elves as it enters. He casts a Jiraga Tree Speaker from the top of his library through Realm Walker. Mark ends his turn. Drake draws and plays a City of Brass. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. He taps his City of Brass to cast Preordain. He scries 2 and draws a card. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks his Lotus to help cast his commander, Esika, God of the Tree. Drake ships the turn to Bailey. During his draw step, Bailey takes a damage from his Mana Vault. He plays a Training Center for turn. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Phantasmal Image. He casts Consider. Krark and Sakashima trigger. Bailey holds priority and casts Flusterstorm, targeting his own Consider. Krark, Sakashima, and the Storm copies all go onto the stack. Bailey continues to hold priority and casts Tybalt's Trickery, targeting one of the Flusterstorm copies. Krark and Sakashima trigger again. He loses his first flip, bouncing Trickery to his hand. He wins his second flip, copying it, targeting the Flusterstorm copy. Trickery resolves, countering the Flusterstorm copy. Bailey mills one, then he exiles until he reveals a Snap, casting it for free, targeting Esika. Krark and Sakashima trigger again. He loses his first flip, bouncing Snap. He loses his second flip as well. Then the first Flusterstorm copy resolves, countering Consider. Then Bailey wins his first flip, copying Flusterstorm, targeting the original because there are no other valid targets. Then Flusterstorm counters Flusterstorm. Then he loses his second flip, but there is nothing to return. Then the original Krark and Sakashima triggers of Consider resolve. He wins his first flip, copying Consider. He surveils one, leaving it on top. He loses his second flip, but there's nothing to bounce. Now that the stack is clear, Bailey casts Mox Diamond, discarding a mountain. He recasts Snap, targeting Esika. Krark and Sakashima trigger. He loses his first flip, bouncing Snap. He loses his second flip as well. Unfortunately out of mana, and the flips not being on his side tonight, Bailey passes to Ben. Ben draws and plays a City of Brass. He moves to combat and attacks Bailey with Channeler. Bailey takes it, and Ben passes the turn. During his upkeep, Mark loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and starts off his turn by leveling up Jiraga Tree Speaker. He casts Beast Whisperer. He casts Heart Warden. Beast Whisperer triggers and Mark draws. He casts Copperhorn Scout, drawing from Whisperer again. He moves to combat and attacks Ben with Wood Elves. Ben takes it, and finished up, Mark passes. Drake draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. He casts Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. Drake passes. During his draw step, Bailey takes a damage from his Mana Ball. He plays a mountain for turn. He casts Snap, targeting Selvala. Krark and Sakashima trigger. He wins his first flip, copying Snap, targeting Lavinia. He holds priority and floats mana. He then bounces Lavinia and untaps 2 lands. He wins his second flip, copying Snap, targeting Beast Whisperer. He holds priority and casts Tybalt's Trickery, targeting his Snap copy. Krark and Sakashima trigger. He wins his first flip, copying Trickery, targeting the Snap copy again. It resolves, countering the Snap copy. Bailey then mills one and then exiles until he hits Stormkiln Artist. He casts Stormkiln Artist. He then wins his second flip, targeting the original Tybalt's Trickery, copying it. Stormkiln Artist triggers and Bailey creates a treasure. Then Trickery counters Trickery, Bailey mills one, and then he exiles until he reveals a Tavern Scoundrel. He casts Tavern Scoundrel. Then Bailey floats mana, and then the original Snap resolves, bouncing Selvala, and Bailey untaps 2 lands. Next, Bailey casts Heat Shimmer, targeting Beast Whisperer. Krark, Sakashima, and Stormkiln all trigger. Bailey creates a treasure through Stormkiln, and with the triggers on the stack, Ben casts Swansong, targeting the original Heat Shimmer. Heat Shimmer is countered, and Bailey creates a 2/2 bird. Then the Krark triggers resolve. He loses his first flip, but has nothing to bounce since it's been countered. He wins his second flip, copying Heat Shimmer, targeting his own Stormkiln Artist. Stormkiln and Tavern Scoundrel all trigger, and Bailey creates 3 treasures. Bailey moves to combat and attacks Ben with a copy of Stormkiln Artist. Ben takes 8, and Bailey passes the turn, sacrificing the Stormkiln copy. At the end of Bailey's turn, Ben casts Vampiric Tutor. Channeler triggers, and Ben surveils Arcane Signet into his graveyard. He then fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. The turn moves to Ben. Ben draws and plays a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life. He taps his Mana Confluence to cast an overloaded Dam. Channeler triggers, and Ben surveils a Tundra into his graveyard. Then Dam resolves, destroying all creatures. With the board clear of all these pesky shenanigans, Ben gives the turn to Mark. During his upkeep, Mark loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and casts a Circle of Dreams Druid. Mark passes. Drake draws and casts Abundant Harvest. He names land and then reveals until he finds a Marsh Flats, putting it into his hand. He plays Marsh Flats for turn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Savannah onto the battlefield. He taps his City of Brass to recast Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. Drake ends his turn. During his draw step, Bailey takes a damage from his Mana Ball. He recasts his commander, Krark the Thumbless. Bailey passes. At the end of Bailey's turn, Ben taps his City of Brass to cast Mystical Tutor. He fetches up an Intuition onto the top of his library. Ben draws and starts off his turn by casting Jeska's Will, adding 7 red. He taps his Mana Confluence to cast Intuition, targeting Mark. Ben fetches up an Underworld Breach, Savine's Reclamation, and a Lion's Eye Diamond. Mark gives him Lion's Eye Diamond. Ben taps the City of Brass to flashback Savine's Reclamation from his graveyard, targeting his Underworld Breach. Breach enters, Savine's copies, and then Ben returns Dragon's Rage Channeler to the battlefield. Ben casts Lion's Eye Diamond. This is when Drake reminds him of the Lavinia on the battlefield. This is also when Ben realizes he has made a huge mistake. Channeler and Lavinia both trigger. LED is countered, and then Ben surveils Talisman of Dominance into his graveyard. Ben decides the only way to make this work is to force surveil through Dragon's Rage Channeler. Ben escapes LED. Channeler and Lavinia trigger, LED is countered, and he surveils Ledger Shredder into his graveyard. He escapes LED. Channeler and Lavinia trigger again, LED is countered, and he surveils Tundra into his graveyard. He escapes LED again. Channeler and Lavinia trigger, LED is countered, and he surveils Plateau into his graveyard. He escapes LED. Channeler and Lavinia trigger, LED is countered, and he surveils Mana Crypt into his graveyard. Unfortunately, out of enough cards to escape, Ben sinks his head and passes the turn, sacrificing Underworld Breach. During his upkeep, Mark wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. He casts Leaf Crown Visionary. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a green. He casts Llanowar Visionary. Leaf Crown Visionary triggers and Mark pays, drawing a card. Then Llanowar Visionary enters and Mark draws. He activates Nykthos, adding 6 green. He casts Multani's Acolyte. Leaf Crown triggers and he pays to draw. Then Acolyte enters and he draws again. Mark activates Deserted Temple, untapping Nykthos. He activates Nykthos, adding 8 green. He casts Eternal Witness. Witness enters and he returns Summoner's Pact to his hand. He casts Summoner's Pact. This is when Drake reminds him of the Lavinia on the battlefield. Also realizing what he just did, Mark tries to come up with a plan. Lavinia triggers and in response, Mark convotes Court of Calling where X equals 1. He fetches up an Allosaur Shepherd onto the battlefield. Then Lavinia's trigger resolves but doesn't counter Pact due to Allosaur's Shepherd. Then Pact resolves and Mark fetches up a Quirion Ranger into his hand. He casts Quirion Ranger. Leaf Crown triggers and he pays to draw. He activates Quirion Ranger, bouncing a forest, untapping Circle of Dreams Druid. He activates Circle of Dreams Druid, adding 7 green. He casts Fierce Empath. Leaf Crown triggers and he pays to draw. Empath enters and he fetches up a Regal Force into his hand. He casts Elvish Archdruid, paying to draw through Leaf Crown. He casts Sylvan Scrying. He fetches up a Gaia's Cradle into his hand. With his entire board now rebuilt, Mark passes the turn. Drake draws and starts off his turn by casting Tainted Pact. He holds priority and sacrifices his Lion's Eye Diamond, adding 3 blue. He then exiles until he finds Underworld Breach, putting it into his hand. He casts Underworld Breach. He escapes LED. He cracks it for 3 black. He escapes Thassa's Oracle. It enters, and with the trigger on the stack, he escapes Tainted Pact, exiling his entire library. Oracle's trigger resolves, and Drake wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what an excellent game tonight. Everyone was fighting and attempting to go off. Bailey had all kinds of stack interaction, Ben fought through a major setback and almost got there, and Mark rebuilt his entire board in only 1 turn. These are the types of games that we love to play. Congrats to Drake on his win. It seemed like he was out of the game with his turn 1 land grant play completely blowing him out of the water. If it wasn't for the Wheel of Fortune, he would have probably been dead. He was able to come back after the board wipe and seized his opportunity to win the game. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more like this, be sure to subscribe. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.